You found yourself on another edition of Let 'Em Know Kings United, and on today's episode, I don't know how the Chicago Bulls pulled this off, but they got a much-needed win thanks to DeMar and Alex Caruso, and boy, did they need this win. They needed this win in the worst way. We're going to break down a Bulls win for the first time, ever on today's edition of Let 'Em Know Kings United. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for the post-game reaction podcast of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Sacramento Kings, and the Chicago Bulls. This is Let 'Em Know Kings United. Let 'em know, nation. You know what time it is. Welcome to another edition of Let 'em Know Kings United. This is your Cleveland Cavaliers, Sacramento Kings, and the Chicago Bulls post-game reaction podcast. And I'm your host, Carlo Weisberg. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. And you can find Let 'em Know Kings United, which is absolutely free and available on Amazon Music, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Pandora, Spotify, and wherever else you want to listen to the show. Give the show a follow on those platforms if you can. Please turn on your notifications so you know about the next episode. Please rate, spread the word out to your friends, and give Let 'Em Know Kings United a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. You can also listen to the show on Spotify for podcasters. Just go to anchor.fm/CLESK United. That is anchor.fm/CLESK United. If you can give this show, like I said, a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on, it is a great way to support the podcast, and I appreciate every single one of you for tuning in to today's episode. You know, I don't understand why the Chicago Bulls continue to do this. Continue to stress me the hell out and find a way to come back. But I guess third time's a charm, right? I guess the third time is a charm that the Chicago Bulls get a much needed big win over the Miami Heat by a final score of 102-95. This was the first matchup between the teams since the Heat rallied from a late fourth quarter deficit to win a play-in tournament game back in last April against the same Chicago Bulls. From there, the Heat entered the playoffs and launched their improbable run to the NBA Finals. So in that retrospective, I guess you could say that the Chicago Bulls got their get back last night at the hands of the Miami Heat. But as much as I like the fact that the Bulls won, despite the fact that DeMar and Alex Caruso stepped up big time in this game, there's one thing that I do not like about this win. Now, I know that a lot of you might come at me for being like a Debbie Downer or a negative Nancy after a win. Now, hear me out. I appreciate the fact that the Bulls competed their butts off. I appreciate the fact that we won this game. And like I said, this was a much-needed win for the Chicago Bulls. We found a way to win the game, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. But what I don't like, though, is once again, for the third consecutive game, we fell behind by double digits and we were forced to try to mount a comeback. And for the 6th straight game, according to my NBC Sports Chicago broadcast that I watched last night, for the 6th straight game, the Chicago Bulls were facing a double-digit deficit. At one point, we trailed 22-1. Yeah, I'm not joking when I tell you all this. It was 22-1 Miami. We got outscored in the first quarter 26 14. Now, thankfully, we won every quarter after that and outscored the Miami Heat in the fourth, 34-21, which I like. I like the fact that we fought. We didn't give up after being down 22-1 at one point. We found a way to come back. And Zach LaVine said this: we've been here before. Or it's a trend that we don't want to have. We're going to have to nip it in the bud sooner rather than later. We haven't figured it out why it's multiple times coming from behind. And I think I know why, Zach LaVine. Allow me to answer your question. The Chicago Bulls have not learned the importance of locking in from the jump. They are not the type of team that plays 48 minutes or all four quarters, at least not yet. We're capable of playing one solid half of basketball, whether it's the second half. Mostly our comebacks come from the second half. But in order to be a team that can compete, now the Chicago Bulls are in a sort of a rebuilding mode type of sense, because with all the rumors, with all the news about Zach LaVine going around, who knows what's going on in the streets of Chicago. But I do know this: if the Bulls want to get better at some point this season, they need to learn how to lock in and play all four quarters for 48 minutes. Stacey King said this on the broadcast. You can't wait to play one half to lock in offensively and lock in defensively. As soon as the ball is tipped up, you gotta think in your mind, it's time to lock in. It's time to lock in and play with heart, play with passion, and play with fight. Now, I will say this: the starters at one point in a 20-1 game got booed out of the building. And the starters deserved it. The starters deserve to get booed. Nobody except Alex Caruso scored a point at that particular point. I credit the bench for stepping up and fighting their way back. And as soon as the starters saw the bench unit, I bet the starters were like, we need to learn how to play with the same fight that the bench has. Because right now, the real starting lineup deserves to be the bench unit. Torrey Craig, Aya DeSumo, Javon Carter, Patrick Williams, and Andre Drummond. Right now, those five guys are looking like the starting lineup for the Chicago Bulls, while the regular starters, with the exception of Alex Caruso, looks like the bench unit. I mean, that's just me. That's just me. I get that in the fourth quarter, Mr. Fourth Quarter, DeMar DeRozan found a way to step up. But my God, the Chicago Bulls need to learn a lot about locking in defensively. And again, it comes back to the word mentality that I talked about in yesterday's show. I think the Bulls don't have a sense of mentality yet. We don't. The bench has it, but the starters don't. I still think that DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, and Zach LaVine are just done playing together. And in some sense, Zach LaVine has requested a trade from the Chicago Bulls. And Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat, I gotta give credit to the Miami Heat. And I gotta give kudos to Erik Spoelstra. A lot of you may not like the Miami Heat. Okay? A lot of you may not like about how the Miami Heat does things. But you know what? They have this Heat culture. They have this standard that has led them to multiple NBA championships, that has led them mostly to the NBA Finals. And I cannot believe the disrespect that Erik Spoelstra has been given. I mean, essentially that Erik Spoelstra should have won Coach of the Year a couple of times. But I need to give credit to the Miami Heat, who started out really good. It was 22-1 at one point. Jimmy Butler said, we started out great. We're known for doing that. And then we let it get easy on them. They made shots, as they've done in the past against us, and against multiple other teams. We let one get away. So essentially, the Chicago Bulls stole a win over the Miami Heat because the Miami Heat beat themselves. Despite the fact that Jimmy Butler scored 25 points last night, and the Heat essentially led wire to wire until the final minute of the game. And the biggest bucket came from Alex Caruso, who hit a three-pointer in front of the Miami bench with 51 seconds, gave the Bulls their first lead of the game before DeMar DeRozan's turnaround 18-foot jumper on Vasquez Jr., who is a really talented rookie, put Chicago up for good with 22 seconds left in the game. I was trying to bait Butler into coming, DeRozan said, but I knew he wasn't going to leave off Zach. It definitely felt good to see it go in and get the crowd reaction, especially how we started. Bulls Nation stood up and stepped up big time. I commend the crowd at the United Center for bringing the energy to the Chicago Bulls, and that's what drove them into this big win, despite the fact that once again, another poor start for Chicago, and Billy Donovan has had enough. He said it was 20-1, right? There's nothing good going on when that's happening. Who noted a season-high 45 three-point attempts as part of the comeback for Chicago. We talked about it at walkthrough. I put up not a lot, but enough clips of guys passing up shots. They need to shoot the basketball when they are open. And another thing that I noted from Billy Donovan's press conference is this, that Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic are getting really good closeouts. The Chicago Bulls are not reading the offense, and they are not reading any closeouts. But overall, I am not going to be that negative when it comes after a win. If the Miami Heat won this game by a score of 102-97, that would be a totally different script. But you know what? This was a win that Chicago desperately needed and the Bulls desperately needed. And you know what? That is the fourth straight win for the Chicago Bulls against the Miami Heat, and they snapped the Heat's 7-game winning streak coming in. But now the Chicago Bulls need to build on it. Now they need to replicate that same effort that they did on Monday night against the Miami Heat, unless they got to get into a better start. And if the Bulls get off to another slow start on Monday, it might be a really, really long night. So if I was Billy Donovan, I would challenge the guys to lock in on both ends as soon as the ball tips up. As soon as either Nikola Vucevic or Bam Adebayo win the tip for their respective teams, the mentality of the Bulls has to be, okay, it's time to lock in. No more dilly-dallying, no more goofing around. We got business to take care of, and we got a W to bring home for the fans of Chicago, and we need to bring a W home in the United Center. That needs to be the proper mentality going into tomorrow's game against the Miami Heat. But for right now, though, we got to enjoy this win while there's still time to, but now the Bulls need to learn how to build on it. The stats for this game, 44.5% for the Chicago Bulls compared to 43% for the Miami Heat. They made 16 out of 45 threes for Chicago, 12 of 36 for Miami. The free throw percentage, Miami had the better percentage, 82% compared to 73. The rebounds, 44 to 34 in favor of Chicago. I think the Bulls, to their credit, stepped up on the rebounding, especially in the second half. The assist numbers were pretty even. 24-23 in favor of Chicago. The steals were pretty even on 9-9, but 6 blocks for the Chicago Bulls compared to 0 for the Miami Heat. And I found that really surprising because Bam Adebayo is a damn good blocker, all right? He is one of the best centers in the NBA this season, and I am surprised that Bam Adebayo didn't block a single shot last night against the Bulls. I will not be surprised if Bam Adebayo has more blocks come Monday night. But again, we'll see how it plays out. But 6 blocks for the Chicago Bulls. I give credit to the defense of Chicago, but again, the bench unit stepped up big time, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. The Bulls committed 13 turnovers, while the Miami Heat scored 15. The Miami Heat gave up 17 points, and the Chicago Bulls only gave up 13 points. The fast break points were 19-10 in favor of Chicago. The points in the paint, 32-22 in favor of Chicago. And again, I think the Bulls still need a big point of emphasis of getting more shots in the paint and reading any closeouts. Duncan Robinson, that boy, can just straight out shoot. 17 points. He was 4 for 5 from three-point range with 7 assists and 3 rebounds. Jimmy Butler was the high man for Miami with 25 points, with 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. He was 7 for 7 from the free throw line as well. Bam Adebayo, a double-double for him, 24 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, but 3 turnovers for Bam Adebayo. That is not like him whatsoever. As far as the Chicago Bulls, DeMar DeRozan was the high man for Chicago with 23 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. Mr. Fourth Quarter does it again. Mr. Fourth Quarter does it again for the Chicago Bulls. Vucevic with 15 points, 8 rebounds. Caruso finished with 11 points with 3 assists. Zach LaVine, 13 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. But the bench unit deserves a whole lot of credit. Javon Carter came in with a big spark out of the bench. 9 points, 3 for 9 from three-point range with a rebound and an assist. Torrey Craig. I love Torrey Craig's aggressiveness last night. He finished with 7 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. But overall, the Chicago Bulls got a much-needed big win against the Miami Heat. Now they got to build on it going into tomorrow's game, but they also need to learn how to lock in for 48 minutes as soon as the ball tips up. We cannot allow another bad start to kill the Chicago Bulls' momentum and force the bench to exert a lot of more energy on making a comeback. If we get a lead early and learn what it means to get a lead early and sustain it, then maybe we would be better off. But right now, we got to enjoy the win. Chicago worked hard for this win. They dug in with this win. We fought for a big-time W, and they deserved a big-time W. We got to learn how to get to a better start, and we got to learn how to lock in offensively and defensively. But when you get a win in the NBA, it's special because wins are hard to come by in this league. That's going to do it for today's edition of Let 'Em Know Kings United. You can find this show on Amazon Music, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Radio Public, Pandora, and wherever else you want to listen to this show. Give the show a follow on those platforms. Turn on your notifications so you know about the next episode. Please rate, spread the word out to your friends. Give Let 'Em Know Kings United a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Skylar Weisberg, and I will see you right back here for another episode of Let 'Em Know Kings United.